All right, we are going to get started. If you could find your way to your seats, please. All right, welcome back. Welcome back, everyone online. I hope that you're all there and chiming in. We are going to spend the rest of our time together before we break in 2 hours talking about all of this and thinking about what comes next. So we're going to do this in 2 parts. We're going to spend a few minutes just really thinking about what we saw and heard from our last exercise. And then we'll take an even bigger step back and just really think about the whole, everything we've talked about for a couple days and where to move forward. So David Ewing Duncan, who is up here and one of our great roundtable members and journalist and one of our favorite people to help us moderate because he asks great questions, is going to lead us through the afternoon. So I'll turn it over to you, David. Thank you.
Thank you, Brooke, and thanks for everybody sticking around. We managed to not have a day that was canceled today, although I think we should check with the weather people on maybe rescheduling our meeting so that we don't bring bad weather, which seems to be almost happening each time. But anyway, I think it's improving outside. So I think what we're going to do, this is going to be a somewhat informal session, and I think everybody's mostly gathered around here, the group we have. And this is where we take these 2 days of meetings, which were separated by the weather, and we start talking about, I mean, in the roundtable itself, in this session, these 2 days, we've done mostly identifying problems, talking about people's experiences, academics who have studied communication, what they've learned. We're going to talk a little bit now about what this very knowledgeable group, the ideas that we have put up here, and I do love the little shaking up process that Brooke did with our money and putting up these ideas. I work a lot with groups like IDEO that do these crazy sessions where you have giant whiteboards and everybody plays a role and all of that, and so this is a little bit of that, and I think it's fun to shake up meetings and do this kind of thing. So I almost feel like it's the Oscars or something. I don't have these in a fancy envelope, but give you who won our little, session here, and basically how much gold was put in for each of these ideas. And we had a rather overwhelming winner, as a matter of fact, which may not, well, it doesn't come to me as a huge surprise given the audience here and what we know needs to be done. But 64, are these dollars, Brooke? Millions, $64 billion was committed to communications training. So we have a large grouping there in the middle of the boards that are focused on various ways to do that. But I think this is in all aspects of training, although it seems like the focus was more on training scientists, but I think that's a broader field really about all people involved with communications, whether it's someone like myself as a journalist.
There's another one for journalism.
Oh, journalism? I think that was funding journalism, that one. Is training? Okay, never mind. Never mind. We didn't get, I was trying to get a piece of that $64 billion, but apparently not. Okay, I almost feel like we should have a drum roll before these. Coming in second, boundary organizations, and connectors like Compass and other groups, which are absolutely the glue, I think, that binds a lot of the aspects, these interfaces among the different parts of communicating science. And that had a big drop-off, though. We went from $64 billion to a mere $35 billion. So clearly communication training was the biggie. Boundary organizations, and, oh, actually, I'm sorry, we have a tie for second. Science, let's see, what is this? I guess it's bringing science to K to 12. I was mentioning like the Science Corps. I think we had a number of people. And to me, I'm pretty passionate about this one because you don't have science communication if you aren't training younger people about science and about how to talk about it and how to respect it and understand its strengths and weaknesses. So I think that's really important. I'll just quickly go through. Reward system got 22. Community dialogues with scientists 19, which I think is a really important one. Journalists have science training, more on the job, that got 15. Rebrand science, which I think is sort of intriguing. Hopefully, as we have this discussion here, I'd like to hear from who said that and what they're thinking about. Science is, lest we forget, is rather scary to a lot of people. And it also purports sometimes to, say something is so when we find out later in the science, as things move on, that it's not always so. And I think rebranding science to make people understand that better. Funding journalism, well, I propose that. That only got $11 billion. So I guess I still have to look for another job. And then finally, CSI for science. And it's funny, as I was seeing the bin for that being rather low over there, I was asking people, why aren't you voting for that? I mean, everybody likes, and I think people said, well, that's probably already funded, by Hollywood. And so maybe, in our hard-earned currency here, people thought that was already taken care of. So anyway, that's our grouping here. And we have a wonderful panel, and it's not going to be a formal panel at all. And we wanted to really have a discussion and a conversation. And what I'm going to ask to do is, we have two subjects we're going to handle between here and 2:45. And one is some response to these ideas, the ideas wall, as we call it. And then we're going to talk about where we go from here. And that's obviously the logical way to conclude a meeting like this. How do we take all this great information, and especially some of these ideas, and where we go? And we did split up the panel in the program with the two panels on my left handling the first section, the two panels on my right the second. But at lunch we were thinking, it might be interesting to bring all four up and get their perspectives, and then also have you all very active participants. So I'm going to start with Bill, who, as we know, is our lone industry representative, holding down the fort. And we haven't heard a lot, other than from Bill, about this rather important aspect of science in our society, and how not only how we communicate what's happening with industry, but as he pointed out, I mean, it is a big source of funding as well for science communication and for science projects. So, Bill, let's talk a little bit about these ideas, and maybe a little bit about the industry perspective. Communications, training, boundary organizations. Are these things you guys are interested in?
Yeah, I think it is. And maybe kind of start off a little bit with kind of framing the way we think about this whole space and how it engages in terms of our objectives. And it's kind of hard to talk about industry because, of course, it's not a monolithic sector, nor is academia or government and otherwise. But really, I just want to say, industry does start in a pure place with this topic. It really gets back into our right to operate, and really the right to operate of anybody who uses science and the work that they do. So we have a drive, as many people do, for the enablement and the use of science to do good with it. Create things that make the quality of life better, create jobs, and improve economies. So that's kind of where we start. And we want it to be done in a responsible manner. So one thing is to kind of get that data-driven perspective on the table. So when you look at the cascade of things, it's from that right to operate and that engagement of the public through science communication as kind of the foundation that then enables R&D. R&D enables industrial products to come to market. Those products and capabilities, and of course, create the mechanism to create the societal benefit of improving the quality of life of people, or of course stimulating economies and jobs. So we have to make that full spectrum of capabilities happen to get that benefit the society needs, of course, to then want to care about science and fundamentally come back to that. So that kind of frames a perspective from that place. I also worry about when we talk about sustainable infrastructure, whether we're framing the challenge correctly or not. For example, if you just say science communication or sustainable infrastructure for science communication, isn't it really more, again, about sustainable R&D or basically sustainable industry, things that, create sustainable societal benefit? So all that's got to come back together again, and I worry sometimes we get over-focused about just communicating. Well, why are we caring to communicate? What impact are we creating from the communication? How can we show people that science does improve their lives, and it's better, you're better off with science than without science? So this is something to keep in mind. I get back to specific points in terms of what brought up, in terms of fundamental training, things like, actually, it's interesting in the voting process because I voted for some of the least ones and didn't vote for the larger ones. Like, for example, in the training and the communication, I didn't vote for that one. Why did I not vote for that one is, in essence, when you look at it from an industrial perspective, as we have employees and we cultivate the talents of those employees, we invest. And we think everybody should invest in the development of their employees. So we invest in leadership training and communication training and all those fundamental team building activities, as well as, of course, their technical training and enabling them, of course, to go to conferences and develop new skills and do the experiments in laboratories. But so the people dynamics aspect of this is kind of core to kind of, again, that table stakes responsibility. And we do that. So, and I think the association, actually, when you get the broader community, I do think in that one in particular, I look to things like associations as being a great mechanism, and also NGOs to enable anybody to gain access to that capability. And of course, we utilize a lot of those groups in what we do internally. We bring in different NGO groups, so small companies, consulting companies, to help drive some of the training that we do within industry as part of that. So when we look at the whole space too, and we haven't talked about it today much, if at all, is impact. So as we look to fund something, create an infrastructure, what impact is that going to make? How do we measure we're creating impact? How do we know where we are today? So we then, of course, make these investments in these programs. How do we know we're in a better place, 2, 5, 10, 20 years from now? So that's an important determinant, funding program X versus program Y from an industrial perspective. Definitely a believer in partnerships. When I look today and listen to the dialogue, I worry within the science community, and I think from industrial, that people are working too much in silos. Like I've heard different things from about marketing is bad, and that industry is bad because it's not trusted. We want to be careful with broad brushing statements because they normally are not correct, uniformly. It's how do we partner across our boundaries? How do we partner across industry to academia, from associations to industry? Industry, I think, is open and willing. A lot of times it's about helping to frame what could we do together. And you'd be surprised by bringing forward novel programs that people may respond to you differently than you might otherwise think. And working with industry is different. So we're not going to have a call for proposals of what to do together. We may not even know what you can do. So part of that is being proactive, saying, hey, I believe this should be done. I see what you do in your market space. I think I could help do something better for you. And what is that? What could we do together? So framing that opportunity, I think, is very important. We do see this as a little bit of a mixture of business-driven results as well as philanthropic. So it depends on, are you doing something that's very diffuse for the greater good, and where we do something very project-focused way that may affect one particular business in a certain way. We do mixtures of both. So we're not purely business-driven, we're not purely philanthropic. It also doesn't mean that with both either the business or philanthropic, we don't expect results. I think everybody, whenever they do any work that they do, right, expects results. What are we going to achieve from this? So that's important. Looking at it as, we struggle with, doing something for the whole. Like when you engage, for example, every employee in your company, or when do you engage an expert core of people to be, say, those spokespeople for a particular area, a particular company or a sector, and which one's more effective and more impactful? And my hope would be, as learning from the group here and the broader community, you could start to make proposals, say, hey, here's how we could do better here. We think you should do X industry. Because, especially from an academic perspective, you study about fundamentally how do you create the best impact more broadly. And I'd say in industry, we're always looking at opportunities of, again, there's got to always be a balance in terms of what diminishes the trust value. But again, when you're just trying to launch fundamental programs, wherever you can offer an industry a perspective to, for example, this something was funded by so-and-so. We do like to get recognition for what we do and what we're trying to fund. We'd like to partner more than just money. We'd like to do it in a real interactive way. So I think don't look at industry just as a money source. Look at it as a collaborative partner perspective. And it's maybe the closing comment here is when we look at different aspects is the trust factor. How do we extract the benefit from those dollars that industry is investing both in R&D and more generally in the marketing and communication of science, and utilize that source of capability, that we protect the integrity within that and we build the trust. So I don't want us to say, I'm a fan of regulatory behavior, but how can you, there's terms that are out there. How can we create those terms? And maybe it is regulated. If you use this term, you have to do X, Y, and Z. But it enables more money to be utilized in a responsible manner, so you don't have people claiming things that are ill-defined but sound like they're defined. This was a database study, or I mean, I'm trying to even get the right words on the table there, but we do look at ways how can we bring our capabilities to bear. And again, we feel like we should be trusted more than we are. How can we work with you in the right way? So fundamentally, we're all operating from kind of a place of purity. But the same point, by working together, we're going to be much more effective. So that's what.
No, interesting stuff. So, by the way, Bill, what did you vote for?
Yeah, I need to remember
money?
now. Yeah, I have to go back. Well, I actually voted for the CSI Science one, so that was one of them. And I actually wrote down which ones I voted for.
So we'll let them know that DuPont wants to be an advertiser.
Well, I mean, how do you excite people? So the more, it's the impact parameter. Like the more you can scale something, the more interesting it's going to be to industry, because we want to look for that impact. How can we take a certain amount of dollars and maximize our return on investment? And that could be purely philanthropically based, but it's a matter of what's the leverage effect. K through 12 STEM education, science literacy, having people just understand what we're talking about, I voted for. And actually, I was convinced that it's actually scientific training for journalists, because we are constantly a little bit frustrated by, as we have to deal with science, how sometimes people are ill-equipped when they come to talk to us. So we have spent a lot of time in grounding, and even when we do that, sometimes they don't get what we think they should get sometimes. So.
Yeah, we talked about that during lunch, and if it comes up again, I obviously, again, a little biased on this, but I think that is such a crucial interface, is to have kind of independent people who are knowledgeable making these connections. I mean, groups like Compass help with that enormously too. But Amanda, why don't you tell us where you put your money? And you've already talked a bit in the earlier session about philanthropy, but maybe on these specific ideas, sure. The communications training, boundary organizations, K-12, or any of the others you want to talk about.
Sure, and I will put in the disclaimer that I invested my money as an individual, not as a representative of the Wilburforce Foundation. I put in for communication training, boundary organizations, the reward system, training journalists, K through 12 education. I kind of spread my wealth broadly, because after all, this was representing billions of dollars.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's too hard to decide amongst all these great options that came forward. It was, when I saw the little results of the numbers of what got picked, apparently I'm in with the popular crowd, because the boundary organizations and communications training are something that we do fund at Wilburforce, and so that's always
this wasn't
nice
exactly a secret ballot, was it?
No. It's nice to hear that other people think those things are important too. The big question that I was left with in reflecting on this wall and how people chose to apportion where they put their dollars. And for those of you that are online, sadly, those are not chocolate coins. It's very disappointing. You're not missing out. So the big question for me is when people walked up and decided where they were going to put their coins, if you put them in this bucket versus that one, what was the problem that you were trying to solve? So if you put your coins in the communications training bucket, what was it that you were trying to solve? And I think we have a list of problems that people identify and a list of potential solutions. And what I would really be interested in doing is drawing those lines, linking up between the problems and the solutions. Because for me as a funder, I fundamentally cannot, I start with a problem statement. and then you think about the strategies that will address that problem. That's how I think, and how I've been trained to think these past couple of years. And so when we just are looking at the solution side, I would really love to reflect back and people think about what were the issues they were trying to address. I don't know if you want to, I'm going to toss it back to you.
No, that's okay. I mean, I think as we were discussing before this, that I know I personally was thinking solutions, but I was also thinking problems. I think most of these are driven by, the identification of an issue that's out there.